Welcome into the Bro 4 Squad podcast. We're here today to give you guys our Bro 4 Squad review on Onward. Today I have the mayor himself, Jeff Hornacek, and I'm the mad scientist, Brian Banner. So Jeff, let's jump right in. Acting cast of Onward. What are your thoughts?
Hello, my elven brother.
They didn't look like elves to me.
Yeah, I guess they didn't. This is their world's iteration of elves. This was an interesting watch for us because I got to see this in theaters when it came out, and then everything happened, and fortunately it dropped on Disney Plus, so you were able to watch it last night. So I actually have not seen this in about a month. But coming back to it, I mean, obviously for the cast, the person who stands out is Chris Pratt, and I'll let you talk about him a little bit more as Barley. Just sort of I don't want to say his career had taken a dip at all because he was in massive movies, but maybe we kind of started to take him for granted a little bit as a performer, and this to me just has me buying stock back in on Chris Pratt. But I want to talk about Octavia Spencer, who I think absolutely makes this movie as the Manticore, and her character. Great. Every time her character's on screen and we get a little bit more development in her, or I guess reversion to her old self as the Manticore, it gets better and better and better. And how she goes from operating a TGI Fridays to basically being like, I want back in on this life that I used to have. Her character arc and her performance was hilarious, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
Yeah, I echo everything you have to say about her. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. Just the idea, taking out the voice actors and herself, just the idea of having a character, and really even a world, which we'll get into this more in story, that has really, we'll say, civilized, I guess, and having her kind of revert back in stages and realizing kind of, it's like the opposite of a coming of age story, I guess, was absolutely fantastic. I thought Tom Holland, we know he can carry a show or a movie in a franchise. Obviously, he's Spider-Man, so he's done that. But I thought he did a great job because a lot of what he does is his charismatic and what he does with his hands and his face. He's a very good visual actor. I honestly didn't know if he had it in him to do that just with his voice, and I thought he did a great job there too. But
well, let's not forget too, like, he has a British accent, so he's basically, he's doing the whole role, like changing his voice also, which could be a little bit harder when he doesn't have the physicality of like a live action role to fall back
right on. Yeah, when people can't fall back on, wait, what are you trying to say with your facial expression, you have to do it all with your voice. It just shows how absolutely talented Tom Holland is, and obviously, his chemistry with Chris Pratt, we know that goes back to on set of the Avengers movies, and they picked up right where they left off. This is they just had it. I don't know what it is, but they've got it. And Chris Pratt, like you said, yeah, I agree, fatigue isn't the right word, but taking for granted what he is capable of. I think he went back to his roots for this. He was very Andy Dwyer-ish, which absolutely works for him. I mean, I think it also helps. Obviously, in recent years, Chris Pratt has gotten in shape, and Andy Dwyer traditionally was not in shape. He was just a big dude, and Barley kind of represents that. So that may have helped a little bit. But he was just that goofy, literally took nothing seriously until he had to mentality, it worked. It was perfect.
I mean, Barley, to me, even with a small sample size, is probably already like a top 20 most lovable Pixar character of all time. And I think the analogy you and I talked about off-pod, he's kind of like a G or a PG version of Jack Black's character in Orange County. Kind of like the lovable, down-on-his-luck brother who, like, at the end of the day, you realize has so many more redeeming qualities than you originally gave him credit for.
Yes, and that's going to lead us right into story. So let's start talking about story plot. They did a great job of slowly sprinkling those moments in with us where we didn't even realize it until they literally go, hey, look what we just did. And that's part of what made this very, very just a genius movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's two parts that work so well in Onward. Number one is the world building, and you talked about this a little bit. Such a cool concept to have this world that, like, used to be mythical and have like all these elements of fantasy, and now they're kind of like have gone by the wayside, or people are just not intrigued by them anymore. And Chris Pratt is just sort of like obsessed with this lore, and it makes his character like kind of pathetic, but at the same time so endearing. You're like, this guy, it'd be like someone nowadays that like was obsessed with the 70s. People would be like, dude, stop. Like those times are gone, but he's just still living in that world. And then the second part is the relationship that you're building up towards that character moment at the very end. And by the way, this is a spoilers review. If you haven't seen Onward, we're going to spoil the end of it. So sorry. But it's building towards what you think is going to be a huge character moment with Ian. And we end up getting that with Barley. And maybe we'll talk about this in Best Scene. But they built up to that so perfectly as far as our emotional investment that if you weren't crying at least a little bit at the end, you're dead inside.
You have no soul. I mean, it was the thing about too that I thought they did such a good job of is, which it's obvious now what they were going to do with that last scene, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute. But as you're watching it, I didn't predict that that's where they were going to go. You didn't see that. You didn't see the sacrifice play.
Well, we're kind of Ian, right? Like we kind of come to the same realization that he does, where he's like, I don't need this moment because I was lucky enough to have a role model in my life the entire time. Because we're with him. We're like, man, I can't wait for Ian to meet his dad. He never got to talk to him.
Yeah, we never got to meet him. And that was, it just, I don't know, the whole idea of it was really, really cool. Like you said, the world is just, we haven't seen this before.
I mean, they could do spin-off movies in this world, and we might get to this in Impact. Easily. There's so much
you can do. I just don't know if they can.
Right. Last thing I want to get your opinion on. I think it was, some people might have not liked this. I think it was genius and worked so well that we don't actually get to hear the conversation between Barley and his dad. I think it worked so much better that it was off in the distance, and you could just feel the weight. We're Ian in that instance, and you're just like, God, finally Barley gets this moment that he wanted his whole life.
It was 1,000 times better that we didn't get to hear it. I think it would have taken away from the moment and taken away from the impact that it had on the story, and more specifically Ian as a character, and even Barley as a character, that we didn't get to hear that conversation. And then obviously you get the little jokes of, what was his wizard name there at the end. So we kind of get a little hint of what the conversation was, but we didn't actually hear the conversation. I think that's what made what was unsaid was so much more powerful than what could have been said. I mean, we say it so much on this pod, show me, don't tell me. I think this is a textbook definition or textbook example of them showing us and not telling us.
For sure.
One other thing I wanted to point on in the story is I think what works so well about this is that it was a great adventure with a sibling. And I think deep down, I mean, we all love our siblings. We all have our moments with them. We all fight with them as kids, but very rarely do we ever get to take like a great adventure with them. Like, hey, let's just get in the car and let's drive and let's go get into some shit. And I think that that's so appealing to so many people. We kind of get to live that fantasy out through this movie. And it's kind of like, hey, what, you can call your sibling and say, hey, what's up? Like, let's have a conversation. It just kind of makes you think about them.
And their relationship, I don't think felt too archetypal. Like, it wasn't like they hated each other, or like Barley was not a bully to Ian, right? Like, Barley really respected him. In fact, he loved him almost too much. And Ian didn't resent Barley. He was just like, I'm trying to come of age on my own. And like, we kind of have an awkward dynamic going on here, but there was it felt very real and genuine, and not like, it didn't fall into every single trope of like, all right, bully big brother finally learns to love his younger brother. Like, no, this was a real relationship with dynamics that I don't think we get to see that much on screen, which made it feel all the more unique.
And a lot of times when you get stories like this, you have the younger sibling is the more mature and the older sibling is the more immature, which you get that in this, but at the same time, like you don't. It's hard to explain without. It's just like a feel, I guess.
Which I think is
both immature and they're both mature all at the same time, and I think that's what makes them a good duo going through this.
Yeah, they bring out the better in each other, and they don't realize that at first.
And I don't know if this is going to fit into story or plot, or it's probably more best scene or scenes, because I know we have several here, but them having their dad on a dog leash and just kind of pulling him around on that leash the whole time, every time I saw it, I giggled. it cracked me up.
I'll tell you this, in the writer's room when they pitched, hey, the dad is not going to have his upper body the whole movie. And I probably would have been one of the people like, dude, that's fucking stupid. We're not going to do that.
There's no way I would have agreed to that.
Right, but the next day they probably came back and they're like, bear with me. Think of all these comedic possibilities that come with that. And I think for the most part, it worked pretty well. They didn't overdo it with like the Weekend at Bernie's type motif, because really the dad is just a sort of a MacGuffin, so to speak, for the plot. Like, his presence is pushing forward the narrative as opposed to like, oh, dad walked in a sewer hole again. You know?
And I'll even reiterate that by going into my best scene. And there are several to choose from, but I think mine is the chase scene. First off, with Chris Pratt's character Barley getting shrunk, and so Ian having to drive, I think that's genius. Them getting chased by these fairies, which we'll get into the fairies here. I think the idea of a biker gang fairies is funny. I don't think they executed it great.
Yeah, for me, one of the few things that I was not like super gung-ho about in this movie. I didn't hate it, but it was like, okay, that's one thing that didn't quite work comedically. And real quick to interject about your scene, incredible animation in this whole movie, and that chase scene specifically. I was like, holy shit, this looks awesome. They did a
fantastic job with that. And the whole, we all know I'm a sucker for chase scenes, so that's why this automatically gets a few extra points for me. But with having really that was kind of the first moment that you see Barley and Ian kind of putting their trust in each other to complete this quest. And then them, obviously you have that falling out moment at the end when they're pretending to be the stepdad and talking to the police officers, was all really funny. And again, bringing it back full circle, that was a perfect use of the dad's bottom half getting out. Oh, he's drunk. He's, walking around like, okay, that was a perfect way to kind of conceal what was actually going on, but yet still understanding and knowing something's up here. So that's kind of where that was kind of the beginning of the culmination of them coming together for me.
That was, and for the record, the dad walks perfectly like how I walk when I'm drunk, like really heavy-footed.
Yeah, that's a slow Tuesday for me.
Nailed that part of it. I have one, and then I think one that we both wanted to talk about. There's so many good scenes in here that we're not even going to get to, like the Bridge of Trust. I thought was a really good scene.
That was a good scene.
But for me, it just has to be the Manticore intro when they go to her TGI Fridays pub place where like Barley says, "This is where every quest starts," and they walk in and it's like the 2 for $20.
It's like a poor man's Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, they have like kids' birthday parties, but then also like the parents can get hammered if they need to. And the Manticore is just so emasculated now. She's like a weekend shift manager at her own pub, and she's like, I don't have it. I lost my fastball.
That line whenever she goes, well, where's the sword now? Well, I sold it. Got into a little tax trouble a few years ago. Needed some money. I was like, that's just like. That right there again, it's just reiterating how good this movie is it's funny for kids, but adults can relate to that and are like, that's hilarious.
The pawn shop scene that follows it is great too. I could have done like a 20-minute scene of them negotiating with the guy.
Oh, for sure. That should be a deleted scene or like a mid-credit scene, just them like improvising that whole scene. I think it was great.
But then the rest of the movie, how the Manticore is just like pounding Red Bull and like so ready to get back to her old life.
Just ripping her sleeves off.
With like a prison tattoo.
Yeah.
So Manticore scene for me. And then we have to talk about, I guess we already did, but the last scene at the end where Barley finally gets to talk to his dad. One of the better moments. I mean, Pixar always balances emotion so well in their movies. And that was just another example of execution.
In my opinion, and this is in no particular order, but this is one of the most emotional scenes Pixar has come up with. I think the song, the Sarah McLachlan song in Toy Story 2, I believe it's Sarah McLachlan, when Jessie is singing it, that is an extremely emotional scene, in my opinion. I think in Cars 3...
The intro to Up, too, right?
The intro to Up is really there. In Cars 3, when Doc Hudson passes away... this is right up there with it toe for toe. The difference is a lot of those have a negative connotation where this one is 100% a positive connotation, which I think puts it above a lot of those other emotional Pixar movies that Pixar is really getting known for. I mean, even the beginning of Finding Nemo, I mean, Nemo's mom dies.
Yeah.
They're not afraid from that emotional moment in a negative connotation. And I think this is when they came in and said, hey, let's do something positive. And they knocked it out of the fucking park.
And something to that imagery of the setting sun behind Barley and his dad, and like I mean, we're not like art majors, but the symbolism of that, it's just like, I don't know, man, it all worked so perfectly.
Yeah, it was. I can't say too much good about that. So let's move on to impacts. What are our impacts on pop culture, on ourselves, just in life in general? What are our impacts of Onward coming on? I mean, obviously there's a lot socially going on where this movie was dropped a week before a global pandemic came out, and then they fast tracked it to their streaming service, which business wise is a fantastic decision, but it gets a great movie in front of a lot of people's eyes a lot faster. And I think that's a huge impact. I think that's something maybe not in a year or 2 years, maybe 5, 10 years down the road, we're going to look back on and go, wow, that was a huge major turning point. And honestly, it's kind of a good social experiment to see how did this work? How does this financially, is this going to be a bust or not for us?
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that aspect of it. I think for me, just thinking of impact of the movie, sort of the other side of the coin, this has to be the favorite to win Best Animated Movie at the Oscars next year. And I think it already jumps into easily a top 10 Pixar movie for me. And I think this is one, the more we get to sit on it and let it marinate, the higher it's going to climb. I think this is, you made the allusion off pod to Ratatouille as sort of like a sleeper movie that never quite gets as much credit, maybe because it's not part of a franchise of movies. But this is one that I think in 5 or 6 years, after everybody's had a chance to watch it and sort of let it sit on their palate, it's going to be like, damn, Onward is like really good.
It's a really good movie. I think it's one that kids, so my daughter's 2, she was captivated by it. I don't think she moved the entire, was it like hour 40, hour 50.
And that's without the
minutes of it.
music, which she normally loves.
There's no music, which is a huge compliment to the movie. That you can keep a 2-year-old's attention for that long. Lots of colors and fireworks and stuff like that, which was good. But I think that 5, 10 years down the road, when she's 12, 15, even 20 years old, I think she's going to go back and watch this and go, man, I remember watching that as a kid and I loved that movie.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it in 10 years. I want to watch it and kind of re-fall in love with it. I feel like this is going to fall into that category, but only time will tell.
For sure.
Anything else on impacts you got for that?
I think we covered it.
All right. Rewatchability. You going to watch this again?
Fuck yeah, I am. I haven't seen it since theaters, so now, I mean, I definitely want to go back and revisit it. Maybe this weekend. It hits all the notes for me. It's a fun
With your
watch.
busy schedule, are you going to be able to fit it in?
That's true. That is the hard time. Is now that I'm stuck in my house working from home, finding the time. So I don't know, Brian. Somehow I will pencil it in.
All right, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you. Out of 10, what are you gonna give this? Or I guess Letterboxd out of 5. What do you give this on that scale?
I don't want to contradict myself from what I did give it. I think I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I'll stick with that.
I gave this a 7.9 out of 10. That's just my own scoring system. Like I said, a few things I didn't really like, a lot that I did. That score may be able to go up on a rewatch, but I will definitely be rewatching this movie, if nothing else, just for the Manticore alone. I want like a short, or even the Manticore to have her own movie.
Yeah,
just like running the Chuck E. Cheese.
There's plenty there. I mean, you could do a Manticore sequel, her like trying to get the small business loan or something.
God, that would be ridiculous.
But there's a lot here, man.
Her having like 3 too many employees, just to fire 3 employees to qualify for a small business.
And then John Taffer comes in. It's like a bar rescue. He tries to save her struggling restaurant.
Jeez. All right, we've gone off the rails here, guys. We are the Bro Force Squad podcast. Check us out on our website, www.com. What?
We didn't say
we forgot the Bro Force Squad part. www.broforcesquad.com. This is why I don't host these things.
They're going to just do www.com, and the internet's going to be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, the internet's going to kick you off the internet just for trying that. Follow us on Twitter at Bro4Squad. You have the letterbox thing that Jeff does. Go ahead and give us a follow on that. Read all of our reviews. And, of course, subscribe to us on iTunes, YouTube, anywhere you listen to your podcast. Subscribe to us, Anchor. We're on them all. For the mayor himself, I'm the mad scientist. We will catch you guys on another mythical quest.
We're going on a journey!
A journey to the perilous path